And then there were 8. 8 teams remain in the quest to lift Thor's hammer and win the Season 9 Smite World Championships, and with that, it's time for my second part of my Worlds preview. I'll be reviewing the performance of the 4 teams you got here, adding some new perspective along the way, as well as going over the teams who were waiting here to begin with. The format is quite simple. It's an 8-team single elimination bracket with a best of 3 quarterfinals and best of 5 semifinals and finals, all over 3 days from Friday, January 13th to Sunday, January 15th at Esports Stadium Arlington in Arlington, Texas. Also, as a bonus for the first time, I'm going to be there in person to watch it all happen. Now, with that all out of the way, let's start with the teams we saw make it out of the groups. Starting off, we have the Oni Warriors, who despite the fears, they didn't absolutely fall apart to make it here. Though it did look dicey at points, such as being the latest victim of the Hex Mambo, or having a 2-0 series lead and kind of looking like they were going to choke it for a bit against the Solar Scarabs. Thankfully for the Oni homies, they didn't choke it. They closed out the series 3-1, and with that, they find themselves here. So, Warriors fans do not have any reason to be depressed just yet. However, this is where I things start to fall apart for the Warriors, because now they have to do something they haven't done since October, and have only done twice all season. Win a series against the Jade Dragons, and as decent as the Warriors looked during some of their placements performances, with some players in particular popping off like Vote, I just think the Dragons are a whole other beast, and I don't see the Warriors going much farther than this. Though, it is in Neil's nature to sort of prove me wrong and go on deep Worlds runs, so again with the Warriors, flip a coin. While it would be nice to see Adapting's team make a legitimate run at a World Championship again, I just don't think it's going to happen, and I feel like this team is likely going to fall short of making it out of Group A. Well, that aged poorly. Okay, let's be real. Who expected the team with a mid laner on Big Boy Ping and a substitute support to absolutely pop off against an SPL roster and probably the best looking SWC team of the year? Unless you were sniffing the EU copium, which I wasn't, you probably weren't expecting it. And the Ravens proved to be a bit more than just a fluke. Kana proved to brush off what was a really tilting mistake he made in the set against the Titans and had a pretty good tournament. Adapting decided it was time to turn back the clock and pull off some absolutely vintage performances. Angry went to the big man Ting school of playing from bad ping and proceeded to pop off, forcing teams to ban away his picks. Cozy apparently role swapped from solo to support earlier this year, and by the way he was playing, it didn't look like it. And to top it off, Vaporish Coast just looked absolutely dominant against his competition, with the matchup against Doomambra in particular looking not really close. However, this team's going to have a very tough first hurdle to climb against the top overall seeded Camelot Kings. And while I personally may write them off and think this is the end, who knows? They've proven me wrong before. They can certainly do it again. I did say there was a chance for the Hex Mambo to make it to the world's main event out of their group, and them being here is testament to the fact that that's exactly what happened. But to say that I expected them to top their group, beating both SPL teams in the process to make it out? Now that would be surprising. But it's not just a fluke that this team made it here. Throughout both their sets against the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors, they looked to be the better team. Johnny proved once again why he was viewed as a hot SPL prospect. And the other players on this team, such as Deathwalker, Trix Tank, and Zeros, had some vintage performances going back to their old times in the SPL. I'd also like to take a second to shout out Reels, because I didn't mention him when first talking about this team, and he's a former SPL player in his own right, and I just feel like mentioning him is warranted. To me, I initially had this team ceiling at top 8, and while they did call out the Kings after winning their set against the Warriors, they're not exactly going to get what they wanted. However, I think what they're getting instead is probably even better for them, as the Olympus Bolts are arguably the weakest team of the top 4. And quite simply, I think that's a team they can beat. So, will the Mambo continue to go there and maybe even beyond by living up to the high expectations they have of themselves? Or are they going to fall back more towards the norm that some people may have initially expected from this team? The Tartarus Titans did ultimately do what was expected of them and win their group, but let's not sugarcoat it. It wasn't clean. A single mistimed teleport by Kana was arguably the reason that the Hounds wrapped up their set in 2, instead of what should have happened, which was that series going 3 games, and who knows where that game goes from there. The Eldritch Hounds also did take them farther than would have been initially expected. Nonetheless, the Titans have made it to the quarterfinals, which is where I thought they would be, but that doesn't mean I'm sold on this team, as they still have a bit of a penchant for weird picks, and while some of them do work, like Paul's set mid, the less that can be said about the Chalk Jungle and Uller solo game against the Hounds, the better we all are. Unfortunately for the Titans, though, they now seem to be out of the frying pan and into the literal inferno, as the Titans got a massive gut punch with the Leviathans choosing them as their quarterfinals opponent, a matchup which in recent memory has been heavily favoring the Leviathans. In conclusion, unless they suddenly show up big in Texas, I'd be surprised if this team even walks away as a semi-finalist, let alone a Worlds winner. Though, since the Titans are my second favorite team, I'd be more than happy if they prove me wrong. I honestly don't know how I feel about this team. Sure, they finished top 4 at the Phase 3 playoffs, but let's consider who they played to get that position. They got absolutely blasted by the Camelot Kings in the quarterfinals, and then beat up on a Titans team who'd literally just gotten a new jungler a few days prior to get their world spot. Then they lost 3-1 to the Dragons, which props to getting a game, but they still lost. Now this team did enter into the Phase 3 playoffs on a bit of a heater, with Baskin and Bolts starting to truly gel together. But their Phase 3 playoffs performance didn't exactly inspire confidence to me. Now I know a lot can change in a month, but how much do you expect to change for a team where the performances of each piece can change on a dime, and you're bound for at least one draft head-scratcher per game? Combine all this with going up against a white-hot Hex Mambo team, and I'm honestly scared for an upset here. Can the Bolts prove my fears unfounded? I feel like we've said this statement ever since this team debuted, but on paper this team is insane. Each player on this team can arguably be viewed as one of the best, or the best, in their respective roles. But it seems that the great start they had at the start of Phase 3 has seemed to simmer down a bit, to the point where they didn't even finish top 2 in the Phase 3 playoffs. For most of the team, I'm not worried about them cracking under pressure. After all, 3 of these guys have won a world championship with United in Season 4, and Finoke is an experienced veteran in his own right. Who I'm concerned about is Pagon, who is still in his rookie year and has never played in front of a crowd like this one will be. Sure, there's times he's looked phenomenal this year in the SPL, but like any other rookie, he's also had some stinkers. To me, his performance could be make or break for the Dragons, but they're still the first team that I truly view as a legitimate contender going into this tournament. Next up, we have last year's defending world champions of a bit of a shakeup in the solo lane. For Panatom, Shinto, and Rongyu, this is a chance at a repeat, and a chance to become 2-time champs, joining some pretty elite company in the process. For Zapman, it's a chance to further solidify his already solid legacy by winning an unprecedented 4th World Championships. And for Haddix, it's a chance to prove all the naysayers wrong and prove his worth. He's already shown his worth by continuing his good play after moving from the Bolts to the Leviathans and helping lead the Leviathans, who were floundering, back towards the top, while his former team struggled without him. But a great showing at Worlds will further solidify that. They may not have last year's Worlds MVP in Yarkor, but we've seen the same story before. Last time the Leviathans lost in the Phase 3 playoffs to the Camelot Kings, they went on to win Worlds. Can they do it again? I'm going to be personal here. When the 8 SPL teams were first announced back in Season 8, my favorite team was the Tartarus Titans, but I always had a soft spot for the Camelot Kings. The Kings were a team full of players I always liked, but who seemingly never won anything when it mattered the most. And to my partial dismay, that was a trend that continued for the first year and a half of their existence. It had gotten to the point that as a fan, I'd started to lose hope that this team would win anything, with the team having made the finals of both the Spring and Summer's Masters lands, losing both of them. However, once the team picked up Yarkor instead of Netrioid, things seemingly started to change. The team who could never win then proceeded to win the Phase 3 playoffs, and for each player on this team, they have unfinished business here at this tournament. Back in Season 3 of Obey Alliance, Variety made a case that he should have been World's MVP, despite being on the losing side of that finals. Big Man Tings has only known disappointment at Worlds, with an 0-3 record in sets on the World stage. Yarkor may have a ring, but being dropped from a defending World Championship winning team certainly leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Then you have Genetics, who ended his first full season last year with a good, but not good enough performance against the Leviathans in the semifinals. And you may notice I skipped someone based off the order of how I usually talk about teams. but that's because I want to save Captain Twig for last. Captain Twig holds the unique distinction as the only player in SPL history to attend the main event of every single Smite World Championship, and he's also never won one. Despite making the finals on 3 separate occasions, each loss has been arguably more heartbreaking than the last. From a run as a scrappy underdog coming short in Season 3 of Obey against Energy, to being upset as the favorites with team rival against SK Gaming in Season 6, and an absolute dogfight against PK as a member of Ghost Gaming in Season 7, it's always ended with a defeat message on the screen. This team has earned their crown by winning the Phase 3 playoffs, but can they get the jewel in that crown in Texas? To do it, they're going to have to do something that no team since Season 4 E United has done. Win the Smite World Championships as a #1 seed. And that's going to do it for me. Thanks everyone for sitting through this whole thing, if you did sit through this whole thing, and I may try and sort of document my experience at the World Championships. Since I'm going in person, I may try to do some sort of vlog thing. It's probably not going to be anything fancy, it's not going to be anything great, but I will still probably have maybe like a reaction video similar to what I did last time, just sort of looking back at this whole thing and analyzing my thoughts and all that. So there might be some content still left over here. But yeah, if you still, I guess, like me that much, I do have a Twitch where I very rarely stream some games, but yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at some point, if not this time next year, to do this all over again.